I would say that because you're in the satellite world, you're not deploying, like you're not doing continuous delivery, but it's deployed like for testing purposes.
Hmm.
It's not in production yet, and it's going to be in production like in few years because the satellite is built at the same time.
So you were building software that is gonna operate a satellite.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's
It
really no place to deliver it except the satellite's firmware, maybe, or like it's gonna
yeah.
sit on the satellite.
So I'm talking about Thales in that case,
Right.
but it was kind of the same thing for Airbus. All the things that we were deploying were for a satellite that was currently built, and we were deploying it like everything for the client or the other entity to test that everything was working with like all the components that are built at the time and for testing purposes.
Dunya, thank you so much for coming on this show with me. We're gonna start right away. You started your career as a quality assurance engineer, and then you made a transition to software engineering. I and pretty much everybody listening would love to know what was your motivation for making the switch.
Sure. So I would just want to go back a little bit before, like during my studies. So I have a pretty standard, I would say, computer science study. I specialize in image processing, which brings me actually to be a QA engineer. So I had the opportunity to be a contractor for Airbus Defense and Space on the special like satellite images side. And I was like, yes, why not? It could be very interesting actually to do the quality of the software and to check images and go more in depth in like in this field. But after a few months, I was like, yeah, that's very interesting to do the quality, to test the software, but I feel very like far from what is built. Even though I was connected with the developers, I was not really part of the team. And also, we were only two for like 15 developers at the time and a lot of software coming. So that was pretty challenging, like on the base, but at the same time, like the job was pretty the same and recurrent. It was like API to test and check the quality. The other thing that motivated me to actually switch was that the software that we were using were very specific. It was from the enterprise, and I felt like I cannot use that after,
Hmm.
and value it. But the main reason was I really want to build stuff.
Yeah, makes
So,
sense.
yeah.
I know a lot. I know a lot of quality assurance engineers. They pretty much feel the same way, but they also feel a little bit intimidated by the move.
Mm,
And I know I encourage a couple of friends also to make the transition because I empathize with everything you said. I also feel like quality assurance engineers are great. They're very much in need, but
sure.
also the job has some barriers at some point. There is a wall that you can hit and then you can never really cross it, and if you get stuck in that area for a really long time, moving to something else will become a little bit more challenging, let's put it
Yeah.
this way. How did you feel about your transition? Like, were you intimidated at the beginning? Was it smooth? Did you get encouragement? Did you get help? Did you face
Yeah.
any problems with the switch?
I was very encouraged. So I asked like for the change, and someone from one of the developer team was leaving. So I had the chance to actually take his place.
Hmm.
And all the people were very senior. So I was like the youngest. And I mean, I was 24 at the time. So I was discovering this whole world of professional world, like company
Hmm.
world in general. So I had the chance to have great mentors there in my team. And I can say that I never found a team again like that
Yeah.
at the time. It's really what I needed, I think, to grow up. And even like the contractor company was very helping me. They offered me like a little uplift, like for a few days to go back to code. Even though like I studied computer science,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
different when you're building like a software for a company.
Absolutely.
So that was very that was not smooth, but it was easy because people helped me.
Interesting. How was the type of help that they offered?
Hmm.
What was the dynamic like? Because I'm curious. Some people, when they try to offer help, they do it in a very non-productive way. They try to
Mm,
take over and just sort
yeah.
of direct everything you do, and they want to control the whole process. But how was it like for you?
I would say that my first day as a developer, my first task was to actually do some refactoring of something that was already present. So I had like to duplicate and navigate the code. And Aliena, which is a good friend now, was my mentor this day, and she explained me how a client work with a web server and how to make this refactor. So she explained me on the board, like on the whiteboard first,
Hmm.
and then showed me in the code and was like, go for it and open a PR, you know?
Awesome.
So yeah, so I had this like jumping easy, I would say, like diving into code, but at the same time, I felt autonomous for the rest of the task.
Perfect. I think that's the right balance, like someone coming in and just showing you where everything is, and then you need to figure out the rest yourself. I think that's the best way to coach someone, and then
Hmm.
wait for that mentee to come and ask for
Yeah,
help.
definitely.
That's very important, I think, instead of
Mm.
just trying to throw everything at the
Yeah.
person.
And at the same time, like the vibe in general in the team was like very open-minded, very constructive in
Hmm.
feedback in the PR and stuff. So we were designing together, having like refinements. So I could see how to think about the software, how to design it, until how to deploy it. So I saw all the steps, like, and everyone was very helpful in that way, but at the same time, like, they offered me the opportunity to grow by myself, so that was very, very interesting for that.
I would love to talk a little bit about the imposter syndrome. We all have it. I have it. I work with a lot of awesome people that make me feel like I know nothing about this field, even though I've been in it for like 15 plus years now.
Yeah.
How did that impact you when at the beginning?
At the beginning, I would say that I felt it's normal that I don't know anything. So I'm not sure I had this imposter syndrome at the time. I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm learning, you know?
Mhm.
And it was the beginning of my career. I had a lot of motivation, a lot of energy. So I was very like greedy of learning. So I would say that today is more like I had definitely have it more today than at the time.
Awesome. How do you cope with it? Like, what are some of the things you would do to sort of maintain this drive and not to get discouraged, by
Mm.
working with a lot of smart people around you?
I try to get the best of them, and learn from them. Even today, like, so today I'm working for Isovalent, and there are a ton of smart people. And I switch from backend development to system like a networking development, which is a whole new field for me.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say that I try to take it step by step. Like, even though I there is stuff that I don't know, I try to ask questions, take the time to read some documentation about it. Like, but finding the right balance between like asking questions, but at the same time being now a senior, like I feel sometimes it's kind of difficult. Like sometimes I'm like I should be able to find out this alone, but last week I was like desperate for a bug that I couldn't like. I was just stuck, and I asked my mentor slash onboarding buddy, "Okay, I'm stuck. I didn't make any progress. It had been a week. I really need help, and just please hold my head on next Monday." you know,
Makes
be
sense.
humble
Yeah.
also about that.
I think that's the important part. The thing is, ego comes in and it plays a big role, and it also, I think, the biggest barrier to a lot of people making progress is their own ego. Sometimes they are in their own way, and if we keep this growth mindset and growth mentality always present, I think that can lead us to better outcomes overall, and it allows us to grow much faster and reach higher levels even. I
Hmm.
think the people who are a bit more stuck in their ways and they shut down all external feedback are the ones who don't necessarily progress the most.
Yeah.
All right, cool. You worked in Airbus, if I remember correctly,
Yeah,
right? When we were preparing for this episode. So Airbus is also a defense contractor, right? And you
yeah.
were working on satellite imagery and all of this fancy stuff. How was it like working in an environment where things were probably more locked down by procedure? It's probably not easy, to navigate in between things, everything that has to go through a certain process. How was it like working in an environment like that?
hmm So I've been working for Airbus, and I've been working for Thales Alenia Space also. So two huge companies
Mhm.
of satellites. And I would say that in general, there are a lot of processes. So at Airbus, the software I was working on was post production. So it was less critical than what I was doing at Thales Alenia Space, which was a ground control software. So it was very different, but at the same time, like I saw the same pattern. It's very hard to convince like more CDOs and C levels to change technologies. You have to do a lot of research before proof that you can actually move to Go, for example, or to Docker. Like all these little steps that you can find obvious in certain fields are not like in defense, which is at the same time very challenging, interesting, but at the same time, like after a few years, it can be a bit tiring.
Mm.
The other thing is that your software has to go through so many checks, um, from like all the libraries, CV, security stuff, to how it is deployed, in which environment, is it safe, is it logged, so that's like very interesting to see all the constraint, like building software with all these constraints. But
Hmm.
at the same time, like as I said, after a few years I was like, I want to have fun.
Makes sense.
I want to be more free in what I'm building.
Yeah, play a little bit
But
more. Yeah.
yeah, but I think like for my first years of my career, it was very nice because I was like having a frame,
Mm,
and in the processes of how we were building software also, like even we were in Agile, we had like deadlines, we had like a very structured teams and everything. So that was actually good for like a newbie in software engineering.
absolutely. I think a lot of freedom limits learning because there's this paralysis of choice and not really knowing what the next step is. Operating in an environment where you have a lot more constraints, I think, is helpful for you to just start on a path, which is the most important thing. And then you would develop what other areas you want to branch out into and explore as you go and advance in your career. And here's my question for you: do you think these constraints have made you a better developer? Because instead of just relying on external libraries that are just within a reach, you needed to think a little bit more about the dependencies you introduce, maybe, or like
Yeah.
try to sometimes reinvent the wheel because you don't want to bring in an external dependency. Do you think this has happened while you were working in these constraints?
I think it happened at Airbus, especially where we were very vigilant actually with the library that we were importing and
Hmm.
using. But I think that at the time, because I was a junior, I didn't really realize the importance
Hmm.
of the choices that were made. I think this is today, like just getting back there, seeing that with more, like a little bit more of perspective, that I realized that it was a huge job to do. But personally, I didn't really have to do it at the time. So yeah,
Right.
but I would say that at Thales, for example, we were not importing libraries like very easily at all. And it was not, I would say, the main problem, but more the deployment, the way you deploy.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what are some of the constraints imposed? Obviously, you cannot do continuous deployment. You had to go through multiple stages of checks and reviews and quality assurance tests, maybe that are a bit more
Yeah.
manual than automated. How was it like to deploy
We,
changes?
yeah, we actually had to release a doc like I don't know how many pages it was, like with all the changes that we introduced, like what was the release. It had to be signed with I don't know how many people, like before you can actually release it to a client or like to another entity. So that was a heavy process. I wanted to move to Docker, like to Dockerize our microservices and everything. and I couldn't do it. Like in a year, I couldn't convince anyone to do it, because it was implying too many changes at the time. So we were like deploying with system D, starting on the
Wow.
services. And I was like, wow, it's
Mhm.
another word. Yeah. Um,
Absolutely interesting. So just to dive deeper into
yeah.
this, and so in order for you to make a release, you had to write an entire document, explain the change log and whatever is going to be changed, and then it needs to be reviewed. Maybe even some test cases built on top of that document, and then that takes a really long time. Like how many times were you deploying per year? What order of magnitude?
So I would say that because you're in the satellite world, you're not deploying, like you're not doing continuous delivery,
Obviously.
um, but it's deployed like for testing purposes.
Hmm.
It's not in production yet, and it's gonna be in production like in few years because the satellite is built at the same time. You
Interesting.
know,
Just,
so
just let me understand. Sorry to
yeah,
just to frame it a little bit better. So you were building software that is gonna operate a satellite.
yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's
It
really no place to deliver it except the satellite's firmware, maybe, or like it's gonna
yeah.
sit on the satellite. Interesting.
So we were so I'm talking about Thales in that case,
Right.
but it was kind of the same thing for Airbus. All the things that we were deploying were for a satellite that was currently built, and we were deploying it like everything for the client or the other entity to test that everything was working with, like all the components that are built at the time and for testing purposes, like with
Wow.
hardware
How
stuff.
would you test that? Like, yeah.
Yeah, like for us, it was like integration testing. It was, yeah, integration testing and unit test, but like testing it with software, like material software, it was not our job.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's a big risk. Like, let's say someone introduces a bug, you will never know until the satellite is in space, and that's probably a bit too late to fix it in some way or another.
Yeah. I mean, it depends of the software if it's embedded or not.
Hmm.
In our case, it's like it's not. It
Okay.
was not. But and I think for embedded system, it's more like more
Okay.
and more constraints. That was I was doing. But for satellite, they are building materials only for testing purposes.
Got it.
So it's what it's used at the time.
I understand. So yeah, there's the embedded aspect, and then there's the clients who control maybe
Yeah,
and manage everything around the satellite's operation and communication, sort of also stuff.
exactly.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah, but still, it's a high risk area, and I would be curious. Like, do you create simulations? Like, sure, integration testing, but what are you integrating with? Because on the other end, there's the control systems, but they're not really live, so you never really know the full impact of
Hmm.
your work. Were there like sandboxed environments that you test against?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
there are environment that we have that are simulating like satellite behavior.
right.
It was provided to our team at the time because it's like a particular knowledge like from the satellite side.
Obviously, interesting. And were any of these tests automated? So you wrote unit tests, but did you write, for example, integration tests? What was the ratio like?
Hmm.
I'm assuming you would lean more towards integration tests as opposed to anything else in this particular case, or was it more a
Mm,
balance?
it was more balanced, I would say, because we did I would say today a lot of unit testing at a time, like making sure that our functions were doing what was needed, especially like decoding, encoding frames, like
Hmm.
from the satellite, like all the communication part. It's kind of easy, I would say, like to test it because there are like standards. So
Right.
you can actually apply the standard and see if you're decoding or encoding properly your data. So yeah.
Awesome. That's the interesting part about working in these industries as opposed to anything else, and maybe even big tech and building SaaS products, is that in a lot of these other industries, there's so much regulation, there are so much standards that pretty much everything is like written down to a certain extent. You just like get like it's gigantic, I don't know, manual or guide
Yeah.
or whatever. It has all of the integration elements, everything you need in terms of communication. I worked on building a couple of those when working on a large transportation network system. So yeah, I fully understand what that's like. It takes away a bit the creative aspect of software engineering, and it just becomes a bit more of a read, apply, read, apply, read,
Yeah.
apply, and test. But yeah, that it's interesting to see what's on the other end as opposed to
Mm.
all of this tech bubble, information that keeps spreading around. Cool. All right. So you mentioned that you moved to startups
Yeah.
and you wanted to have more fun. Obviously, you wanted to operate in a less constrained environment. How was that transition for you? Did you adapt quickly? Did you face challenges? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, that was an interesting move, I would say, in my career. So I left Thales Alenia Space for a startup company called Powder, which is building like mobile application for gamers, like an Instagram for gamers, where you can record your clip and everything and publish them, have a community. So
Hmm.
that was very, very different, definitely. It was my first time working with for mobile app, like doing backend for mobile app. I really enjoy it because I could test like what I was doing on my phone, and like you cannot do it with satellites. That was
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like to have my code released every week and to see users just like sing it,
Yep.
using it. So that was the very fun part of the startup. I like the freedom, like being very independent in our backend team, and even like the CTO was not part, I would say, of the tech conversation so much. They were like, you know what you're doing, so we trust you.
So yeah, very hands off. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And the pace were like very, very fast. We were releasing, yeah, all at least once a week. So that was very interesting also to see.
Did you feel the freedom, the extra freedom was debilitating in the sense that there's definitely way more exploration you need to do before you commit to a certain technical decision, right? Or you didn't really observe that?
When I arrived, the product was already here. I only added new features. So most of the decisions were already taken.
Mhm.
I didn't. I was really building like microservices app and gRPC API, so like very backend stuff, and not so much like yeah. We took some decision about some libraries, but it was like not so much.
Right. The
So
architecture was a bit more
yeah,
figured out as well.
yeah, already. So what I found difficult is writing code very fast, not testing it, don't care about
Test
quality.
it in production. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were like it was I don't know how many users, but like even though it was there were a bug or it was broken, it was not so much a problem. We preferred to have a bug in production than spending I don't know how many weeks testing a feeder and everything, since maybe it's gonna just be through like sometime we wrote code and after 3 weeks we're like this feature is not working, just remove it you
Scrub it.
know
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the world of startups. Throw stuff out, test it, iterate, and then improve, as
Yeah.
opposed to spend weeks and months and years trying to refine something to death.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting that you got to experience this contrast in your early on in your career. I think it's very valuable, and whoever's listening, I personally have gone through a similar process, and I think I learned a lot about both ends, and it allows me to, and I think it allows both of us to make better judgment on
Hmm.
how to balance
Yeah.
things, right? What is the right amount of process versus agility?
Hmm.
And I think this is a very core skill that anybody should be able to have and be able to assess. Tell me a little bit more about how you test your software when it comes to, building in the new startup. You have automated tests. You don't do you not do any automation? Just the release and test in production. And when we say test in production, how do you evaluate that something has worked, especially
Hmm.
on a mobile app level where you have all sorts of clients, different mobile phones, all sorts of weird stuff that could happen, right?
Yeah. So on the backend side we were having integration tests on the gRPC side, like on the API, just to make sure that we were fetching the good data and
Mhm.
everything, like very basic stuff I would say. And on the mobile app, we had some quality engineers that were testing on mobile. So we were deploying at the time on Apple and on Android. So they were testing both of them, but most of the users were in the US using iPhones. So we were testing on iPhone mostly, and it was manual. This part was fully manual. So we communicated very fast, like, I delivered this feature, can you test it please, like making sure that you can, I don't know, connect with your user and everything, can you go through the feed. So it was like very manual on this side.
Got it. And do you have any observability or telemetry implemented so that you can observe what's really happening on the people's mobile's phone, at least with the
Yeah,
application? Uh, do you have any particular tools that you're using that worked really well?
actually we used one tool that I don't remember its name. um Let me think, maybe it will come back.
It's
But
okay.
yeah, it was pushing like notification, and we could observe like having all the data if they use this feature or not. And we had product people that were analyzing like if the feature was working,
Mhm.
and it was a way for us to test that everything also worked properly, like all the flow on the app was working.
And as a backend engineer, how involved are you in the other aspects of the startup? Like, do you feel the need to understand a little bit more the business, the product, how it works, what's the outcome, what you're trying to achieve, or do you feel like you can stay in your lane and just focus on the stuff you're interested in?
In this startup, we had the choice to do like we I mean, we were asked our opinions, feedback. There were a lot of people that were gamers, so that were really involved. I'm not a gamer, so I was like, it's a new word for me. But I actually I wanted to get more involved, understanding how a feeder can work, how can you actually make it work, or iterate on it more on this side than get like providing any real feedback on gamers, I would say, behavior. But a lot of people like was pretty involved, get like giving feedback to the CEO. CEO was checking with us like every month if we have anything we wanted to add, we wanted to test, if we had propositions. So yeah, we like it's what was expected, I would say,
Right.
from the C level.
What would be one thing you would say is important to be succeed in the first environment you were in, the more
Mhm.
tightly locked, constrained working environment? And what would be one thing that is also necessary for you to succeed in working in a startup?
That's a very good question. I would say that in a very constrained environment, don't spend too much energy like fighting against the processes because you can lose a lot of energy.
Yeah.
um but take advantage of what it brings to you. um on the other side, on startups, I would say like I enjoy enjoy the freedom, enjoy what you can explore, um and having the whole vision of a product is so much amazing. Like not being just like one people among a thousand of developers and of people working on a product. So just taking advantage of that would be for me a great like aspect. I'm
Awesome.
not sure I'm answering your question.
No, I think you did. I think the second thing you were saying is more on the level of being more adaptable to changing
Yeah,
circumstances, but also have the broadened horizon to be able to look at the entire product and to just enjoy not being a cog in a big machine,
yeah.
and okay, that's pretty cool. I want to double down on something you said about working in the constrained environments, not to fight the process. I think this is very, very important, and it's a great mindset to have. Not necessarily because that process is the best way and shape and form, but because it's too big to change sometimes. What are your thoughts about it? Like sometimes these companies they say they're doing agile, but they're not necessarily doing agile. They're doing something
Yeah.
that's far from agile, but they call it agile. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I definitely observed it, and it was very different in my two experiences. The first one, they put a lot of money to go into Agile, so it worked very well. The second experience, they wanted to move to Agile, but didn't put the money and the effort in it. So I tried at my level in my team to apply some of the principle that I could apply, and that was making sense for us. For example, having retrospective, because otherwise we were never talking about what wrong, So I would say that I'm not judging like the companies, because I
Hmm.
know it's very hard like to move to something, but at the same time, like, it does not make sense to move to Agile for an industry like that, for me sometimes.
Right.
So it's taking the balance, like it's finding the balance between like having the right processes on the high level and in your team.
Why do you think they are pushing towards a move of agile? Because I think whoever is in charge of these decisions, they know that they cannot be agile.
Hmm.
And I think they know that people know that they cannot be agile. So why
Yeah.
do you think they still push for this? I have my thoughts on that, but I want to hear yours.
I think it's very political
Mm.
from what I saw. Like, being the example, having an entity moving and being the example for others that are modern. It can be, I think, very different from a company to another. But I felt like it was a tendency at the time. And, but at the same time, it could make sense. It could make sense to be more agile and just having more release instead of having V-cycle development. I think it's the way you're trying to apply it then, that is different. But it can be a good move. It can be it. It's how you do it.
Right.
But I definitely think it's political most of the
Interesting.
time.
Yeah, for me, my thoughts on it are I feel it's a bit dishonest just because it gives a wrong impression to people who are not necessarily happy with the process. And I
Hmm.
think if companies were a bit more frank and honest about what are the constraints they're operating within and what are the things they can actually change for the better, I think that sets proper expectations with everybody instead of making everyone think, oh yeah, we're just going to operate like a small SaaS startup that are where everything is possible and the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of these enterprises fail in setting the right expectations.
Hmm.
But yeah, as you said, I also think there's some marketing involved because they want to promote themselves as a modern, you know, type of enterprise. And they also want to attract talent who might not necessarily want to work in these highly
Hmm.
restricted environments. But I still believe that there is value to be gained from either environment.
Yeah. I enjoyed working in Agile when I was at Airbus, honestly.
Hmm.
Like, the frame was really good. I had like an amazing Scrum Master that was doing an amazing job to help us. So, my PO was also very great. It was like working so well. So I had a very good experience about it, like in Agile at the time.
Awesome. You're the first person I hear.
Yeah, I
No,
mean,
I'm just kidding. But
no, but I mean, I need to be honest about that.
of
Like,
course, of course, it's important to be truthful. Amazing. All right, let's switch gears to talk a little bit about some of your other passions.
mhm.
You contribute to open source, and you're a bit more involved also with everything Kubernetes and CNCF. And tell me, what's it like to contribute to that world, and how are you involved?
I would say that today I'm involved in open source that is linked to CNCF, but it's very new with my new job. 2 years ago, I started contributing to TinyGo, um, which is a compiler for Go, to make lightweight programs. And it was my first time like contributing to a project. Wait, no, I'm lying. My first time was at my first Hacktoberfest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I discovered open source world through Oktoberfest. So I had one of my software architects that is working on Revive. He's a maintainer for Revive. So I was like, do you have any issue that you can assign to me for Oktoberfest so I can enter actually this word? And it was a great way to do it because it was someone that I knew. So I can ask him like even offline, if I didn't want to post in public a question that can be very intimidating. But Hacktoberfest, I encourage everyone that is not like familiar with open source to start with that because it's a very easy process and people are so amazing, like so nice um, during this month. So you can actually contribute to several projects or even one project, but just understand and get familiar with the processes of open source. What is a PR, how you can open it, how to communicate with people, because everything is very codified, I feel.
Hmm.
And if you don't know how it works, you don't know which state to add. What is it contributing to .md, all this stuff
Yeah,
that you don't know at all when you arrive in the open source world. Or you saw them like going through libraries, but you don't know how like to tackle it.
brilliant. I have so many questions about this. So let's start with Hacktoberfest is a great entry point to contributing to open source. It's easy for beginners because everything is, as you said, is pretty much structured. There are steps that you need to take, and then at the end of the day, you get your win of your
Yeah.
PR getting merged, and it feels pretty cool. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm a contributor to this now. What added value has contributing to open source added to your career? Do you feel
Mm.
like it was just a fun experience? It's something you can be a bit more proud of, or do you feel like there's way more value that came as a consequence of that?
I think that at the beginning, for me, it was a step to enter the open source world, which was something I wanted to do because I wanted to contribute to the community, what the community was building. So it was my first purpose. Then, by using like TinyGo, as I said, I discovered a bug. So I was like, okay, I can actually fix it and contribute to it.
Hmm.
So it was my first step, like outside of Hacktoberfest contributing to something. And I felt it very valuable for me and at the same time like useful for others. So it was making sense for me, like that is something that I would like to do more and probably as a professional thing. So all these like, steps getting to how I can become like a software engineer in the open source world at the end. And I think what it brings me is that with TinyGo, when I discovered this project and fixing a bug, I wanted to give talks about it. And this is how I entered the public speaking world. So it definitely changed my career. Like for a year, I gave many talks around the world, and I think is bringing like a professional aspect that is very different of being only a software engineer, I feel.
Super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I met so many amazing people around the world. Like I did a very great network. I learned so much from others. So definitely open source world is linked to why I did public speaking then. It's not the only reason, but definitely helped me.
Amazing.
And yeah, I'm not sure if it's today like it has an impact. I think so, but like people didn't ask me the question during interview, for example, for isovalent. But my GitHub is public, so you can see that I've been contributing to stuff. So um, I guess it has impacted in a way.
Yeah. So they might not ask you directly in an interview, but I'm pretty sure, like being also like a public speaker, maybe indirectly someone would catch wind of your talents, and they might approach you for an opportunity down the line. I know from my experience that some of the public work that I've done has got some people's attention, and then they sent me messages, and it created opportunities of maybe consulting, maybe full-time employment. Maybe, you never know,
Yeah.
um, which is pretty cool. Like, tell me a little bit more about your public speaking experience. How was it like? Like, first of all, how are you able to travel the world? Like, do the conferences sponsor your travel and where you stay, or is it more of coming from your own expense? That's the first question. Actually, let's start with that. I will ask you the second question next.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I was talking about topics that were not related to my company didn't sponsor it. So, I asked for the conference to sponsor my travel and expenses for most of the travels. Thanks you to all the sponsors that sponsor conferences that make it possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, it's mainly the conferences for me that sponsor me, but I know that like most of the companies, if you're talking about something that happened during your work or related to your work, that sponsor you. So
Awesome. And this is a reminder to everybody. Don't forget to ask, even if it's not written somewhere.
yeah.
It's okay. Ask. You never know what people can do for you. If there's something you're interested in a conference you want to attend, maybe that you're not able to afford, someone might be able to, figure
Yeah.
out a way to make it happen for you. That's cool. And what are the topics you talk about in your conferences? Like, do you feel that how did you get from the point where you're a contributor to identifying topics
Mm.
that you feel comfortable talking about in conferences?
Yeah, I mostly talked about Tiny Go and one project. So how it worked is that I had one talk and I was like, everyone say you have to apply to many conferences to get, to have your talk accepted. So I applied to like 4 conferences and it has been accepted. So I
In
actually
all
gave,
four?
yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I gave my talks like 4 times, this talk in particular.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mainly talked about TinyGo. I did also an introduction to TinyGo for the International Women in Tech, like from Berlin. And so yeah, it was mainly TinyGo. And in parallel, I gave also talked about introducing Go to people. So it was very like beginner introductionary talks, but it's how I felt comfortable with to start with because I like before I never gave talk to um, but I have more ambition for next year.
Absolutely. Do you have already a topic in mind, or is it still being formulated?
No, it's still being formulated.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah.
Dunya, this is very inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening are gonna be really, engaged, and they're gonna make attempts to, follow a little bit your path. But just to frame it, and I really want to say this, but it's up to you whether you want to say it or not. How many years have you been in this industry?
It had so I my first job I started in 2017. So it has been 6 7 years, six
Six,
years.
7 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. That's what I wanted to for people to know, that you don't have to spend 20 years in this industry before
Yeah.
you can start doing these things.
Yeah.
You can definitely contribute to open source projects. A lot of them need a lot of great talent. You can definitely be a speaker. There are always different categories of
Yeah.
talks and different levels that you can participate in, and it would be interesting if you share something you're curious, you're genuinely passionate about. That
Hmm.
would be really awesome, I think.
Yeah. I participated to a training called Women Developer Academy from Google. It's free, and it helped me a lot because the only thing is that you have to work with one of the Google product, and I was working with Go.
Mhm.
So, but it can be very interesting if you're working with Google product because it helped me a lot. During like a month, we had 4 hours of workshop per week just to practice how to do public speaking, how to write articles,
Mhm.
like becoming more open, to the world with your work and everything. So, and it helped me a lot, like
Very
to,
valuable.
yeah, and to gain confidence that you can actually do it.
All right. As if any of this is not enough, you also wrote a book, or at least contributed to writing a book.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm co-writing a book, which is called Learn Go with Pocket Size Projects at Manning. I'm co-authoring it with Aliénor Latour and Pascal Bertrand, which are who are old friends from Airbus, old colleagues, and very, very good friends now. And it started from Pascal wanted to change your job. And I was like, you need a LinkedIn profile. because he didn't have one at the time. That was
Yeah,
very like
interesting.
appealing. So we built together his LinkedIn profile, and then because he's a very very talented person,
Hmm.
a lot of recruiters asked him to get a new job, offered him a new job, and some of the publisher offered him to review a book, a technical book about Go. And it's how everything started. He put like the first fee in Manning as a technical editor, and then offered, like, proposed to us, Alienor and I, to review book. But I felt like I don't have the level to do it. Alienor was like, yeah, definitely. So Alienor became also technical editor for another book called Shipping Go. And um, Manning then offered to Alienor to write a book about like writing little projects in Go. And I was like, I don't want to do it alone, but if you're in, let's go for it, like the three of us. And I was like, I feel pretty confident to do it with you guys because they are more senior. They are like, Pascal is English native speaker, so he writes very well English and everything. And I was like, it cannot be like not a good experience, you know? It's a great opportunity to do it. And also, I missed so much working with them. This is two-person that helped me so much, like when I was at Airbus at the beginning of my career. And we moved all from there, and we were like, we take like tea time and we talked about a lot of what we were doing in different companies and everything. So how it was different, and we were bringing knowledge to each other. So I
Exactly.
really missed that.
Tell me more about the process of writing a book. Like, how is
Yeah.
it like? Where do you start? How do you define the outline? How do you write the chapters? Where do you find the time to write the book?
Mm, that's a good question. So first we had to do a proposal with the chapters, and we thought, like, we brainstormed at the beginning what we want to teach to people, the content of Go we want to teach, and how we can actually make fun projects. Like each chapter is like a very bundled project that you can build. So we started like brainstorming and wrote stuff. The proposal is kind of different of what we are building today, but we had a proposal that was accepted. And how we actually write is, we do mob programming for the code. So we wrote the code all together. One is navigating the code, one is driving, and one is taking notes about how we think about the project and what are the steps. We try to, like, each session, like, we have 1 to 2 sessions per week during lunchtime of an hour, and we do the code part. Then we have a technical editor that is reviewing our code, who is Egon Elber, a very talented senior software engineer in the Go field. He wrote a lot of stuff, so he has a great knowledge and bring a lot of good feedback of the code that we're writing, and even like on the content. And then we write asynchronously the chapters, so it depends of the time we have in the week. It depends on also, like, if it's easy for one of us to explain something. Sometimes we have someone doing all the drafts, with all the headlines, and then someone is adding the code, the other is adding some text and some explanation to go further. So it's like, it really depends of the chapters, like. But definitely when I'm writing, Pascal or Aline are getting after it to just clean all my sentences.
Awesome. How much time does it take from start to end? Is there a deadline imposed by the publisher, or is it more a bit free form and it really depends on when you
Yeah.
finish?
I would say that they expect from us to write a chapter per month, but life is tricky.
Absolutely.
We had to take some breaks sometimes, so we try our best to respect that, even for us, because at some point, like, you just get tired of, like, we try to, like, every week to make progress, at least. It's We have a sync meeting with our editor once a week, and we try to have something to say, to make progress and make sure we are on the track. And if you're not, alerting about it, like
Awesome.
like in the software engineering world.
Absolutely. It sounds daunting, but it also at the same time it's a great opportunity to say you're a published author. Do you make money? Do you become rich after you publish the book?
I don't think so. I think it's more valuable to write Go lines of code than writing a book.
Hmm. Interesting.
But I would say that I'm not doing it for the money today. I'm really doing it because I enjoy working with Adina and Pascal and learning from them and learning about Go, like some stuff. Because when you have to teach something, you have to understand it so deeply.
Absolutely.
So, like, we just wrote the chapter about concurrency and channel, and I'm so bad at it. I'm not gonna lie. And I'm still like, I did a diagram yesterday, and I was like, everything is so false about that. Like, it's not the expected behavior. So I'm learning so much at the same time, and I'm very excited for people to read it. So just to note, the book is not published yet. It's in early access on the web. But I feel like we had great feedback from people that even that are using it for workshops as also like a like just content to build and to share. So I'm very happy of that.
Awesome. I will definitely share a reference to your book because I think, as I always say, the best way to learn anything in the world is to build. Literally, I was talking about this yesterday. I think the process of, hacking a little bit, reading, then hacking a little bit more will allow you to not only like read about concepts and consume information, but consolidate that information and transform it into actual knowledge and experience that you can carry with you for years to come and utilize it in your career. That's the best way to learn. If you just read material and not build anything with it, it's just going to be information, probably a bit transitory. It's just going to come and go. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't relate to it, it's not going to stick forever.
Do agree. You need to
Awesome.
practice.
Absolutely. Dunya, this has been amazing. I really loved our conversation. Do you have any advice for the folks who are listening to us about how they can follow an interesting career path as yours, be as,
Now I feel like
accomplished? Let's put it
as
that
an
way.
investor. I do not think today that I have like a great path career. It's not how I see my career. I see it as pretty lambda actually. But what I would say is like try to do something that you love, that you like. And what drove me until here is really like keep learning and keep doing things that you love. Like if you get bored somewhere, if you don't think it's not corresponding to you, take your courage and make everything to change to go where you want to be.
Amazing. This is a great way to end our episode. Dunya, thank you very much for your time, your insights, and whatever you shared with us. And we'll catch you all next time.
Thank you a lot for all your content, Basim. Have a great day.